catastrophic flooding. That includes Asheville, North Carolina.
Just over the mountains, much of Asheville, North Carolina is underwater this afternoon.
And we're dealing with a situation that is unlike anybody's ever seen.
I've directed my team to provide every available resource as fast as possible to your communities.
The flood reached the roof. She held on. Her son and parents didn't make it. Asheville, North Carolina. September 27, 2024, morning. She is on the roof. 4 of them, Megan Drye, 39 years old, her 7-year-old son Micah, her mother Nora, 73, her father Michael, 73. The water that was at the front door an hour ago is now at the 2nd floor, and it is still rising. Megan is texting her sister Jessica, who is in Texas, watching this happen in real time through photographs sent from a phone that could lose signal at any second. Jessica is on Facebook, begging, screaming into the internet for someone, anyone, with a boat, a helicopter, a rope, anything to go to her family's address in Asheville and get them off that roof. The calls to 911 have already been made, more than once. 911 is busy. Not unavailable, not offline. Busy. Because right now, at this exact moment, the French Broad River running through Asheville has just broken its own all-time flood record. A record that was set in 1916. A record that had stood for 108 years. The river gauge measured 24.67 feet on September 27, smashing the previous record of 23.1 feet set in July of 1916. The entire city is underwater. Every rescue team is already deployed somewhere. Every boat is already carrying someone. Every helicopter is already overhead somewhere else. The Drye family are not the only people on a roof in Asheville right now. They are one of hundreds. And then the house stops holding. What happens in the next few minutes will take 3 members of this family. It will pull a 7-year-old boy named Micah into the brown, roaring current of the French Broad River. It will leave Megan Drye, broken, alone, hypothermic, clinging to debris in water that does not stop moving. And it will produce the most devastating 4 words a mother has ever screamed into a flood. But before we get there, we need to understand what kind of storm does this to a mountain city in the middle of America. And why nobody, not the forecasters, not the residents, not the people who had lived beside these rivers their entire lives, was fully prepared for what Hurricane Helene became when it turned inland. If this is your first time here, this channel is built for stories like this one. The real ones. The ones that happen to ordinary families on ordinary mornings that become something no one should ever have to survive. Subscribe now, drop a comment, and stay, because this story is the hardest one we have told yet. Most people think of hurricanes as a coastal problem. Asheville is 300 miles from the coast, tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains, surrounded by peaks and forests and the kind of scenery that makes people move there specifically to feel safe from the chaos of the outside world. In fact, a growing number of Americans have been relocating to Asheville in recent years precisely because it was considered a climate-safe city, away from the coast, away from wildfire corridors, high enough in the mountains to feel protected. They had forgotten something the old-timers knew. Asheville sits in a bowl. The city lies at the intersection of 2 major rivers, the French Broad and the Shenandoah, surrounded by steep mountain slopes that funnel every drop of rainfall directly into those waterways. When it rains hard in Asheville, everything runs downhill, into the rivers, into the streets, into the homes. Now imagine what happens when it doesn't just rain hard, when it rains without stopping for 3 straight days. One weather station in Yancey County recorded 31 inches of rain between September 25 and 27. Parts of Henderson County received more than 17 inches. The weather station at Asheville Regional Airport had already recorded nearly 14 inches when it stopped working on the morning of September 27. 14 inches before the instrument broke. From the start of the precursor frontal showers on Wednesday evening to the heart of Helene, moving through on Friday morning, it was one of the most incredible and impactful weather events North Carolina had ever seen. The soil was already saturated before Helene arrived. Every creek, every stream, every river was already running high. And then Helene, a Category 4 hurricane that had made landfall in Florida the night before and was now tracking north as a tropical storm, added its own walls of moisture to ground that had nowhere left to put it. The result was not a flood. It was an erasure.
Watch whole houses just crumble and go down the river, trucks turn end over end. Nothing, I've never seen nothing like it.
More than 490 water rescues were performed across Buncombe County alone. Historic river flooding destroyed Asheville's River Arts District. The historic Biltmore village was inundated. At least 300 landslides occurred in Buncombe County. Clean water was not restored to the city until November. The flood hit on September 27. People in Asheville had no clean water until November. And in the middle of all of this, on a rooftop on one residential street in one neighborhood of this broken city, a family of 4 was running out of time. They had stayed. This is not a story about people who ignored warnings. Inland communities in western North Carolina had not been told to evacuate. Helene's catastrophic inland turn seemingly caught people off guard. The warnings that existed were aimed at coastal communities. The mountain towns did not have the same level of alert. Megan's parents owned the house. It was solid. It had been through storms before. These were the mountains, not the coast. When the water started coming in, they went upstairs. When upstairs became underwater, they went to the roof. They called 911. They waited. Megan texted Jessica. Jessica posted on Facebook. Strangers shared the post. Nothing came. From the roof, they could see the scale of what was happening. This was not their street flooding. This was their entire world flooding. 18-wheelers floated past. Buildings came apart around them. A dumpster landed on their roof. Then the house shifted beneath them. A tangle of power lines dragged them all into the current like leaves caught under a rake. The water took them all at once. What happens next, Megan Drye has described in fragments, because that is how trauma works. Not as a continuous film, but as flashes, images burned so deep they never leave, surrounded by gaps that the mind refuses to fill. Her father was beside her. He was panicking. The water was overwhelming him. He grabbed at her, pulling her under as he fought the current. She had hold of a tree. She was trying to hold onto him and hold onto the tree at the same time. She couldn't do both. The water took him. Her mother was holding Micah. Then, across the roaring brown water, she heard him. Her 7-year-old son, his voice cutting through the noise of a flood that had swallowed an entire city. "Jesus, save me." Those were his last words. Not her name, not a scream of pure terror. 4 words, the name of the only person he believed could still help him. "Jesus, save me." Then silence. Megan has said something about that moment that stops every room she has ever said it in. "I was never more proud of my son for not screaming my name, but for screaming Jesus." She was in the water for 3 hours. Alone, injured, with nothing around her but debris and the current and the knowledge of what had just happened. The French Broad River was running at a record 24.67 feet. It was carrying everything the mountains had sent down: trees, cars, pieces of houses, the contents of other people's lives. She was part of that debris field now. She found 2 shipping containers wedged together. She forced herself into the corner between them, using them as a barrier against the current that kept slamming into her like waves against a cliff. She went under multiple times. And in those moments underwater, she is described hearing something, not the flood, something else. In the midst of the chaos, all I heard was God telling me to be still, to stop fighting the water, to let it carry me to where I needed to be rescued. She stopped fighting. She let the water carry her. A police officer on a nearby bridge spotted something moving in the current below. A person, alive, barely. What followed was an hours-long rescue operation, as emergency crews fought to reach her before her strength finally gave out. They reached her. Megan Drye arrived at the hospital with hypothermia, a fractured ankle, bruises covering her body from the debris that had struck her repeatedly during those 3 hours in the current. A nurse brought her dry clothes. A doctor handed her a phone to call her sister. And then she had to say the words out loud for the first time. Micah was gone. Her parents were gone. She was the only one the water had given back. The search for her family began. Micah's body was found a quarter-mile from where his mother was rescued. He did not have a mark on his body. It took 8 days to find her mother. Nora's remains were discovered on the grounds of the Biltmore estate, half a mile away. She had kept her backpack on so she could be identified. Her father's law firm sign was the only thing left standing where the house used to be. This is the science, and it has to be said clearly. Meteorologists called Hurricane Helene's inland impact a 1,000-year flood event. The combined rainfall from the pre-storm frontal system and Helene itself pushed 3-day rain totals to levels never recorded in the region's history. A 1,000-year flood does not mean it happens once every 1,000 years. It means it has a 0.1% chance of occurring in any given year. It means the infrastructure, the warning systems, the emergency protocols, none of them were designed for it, because nobody in living memory had seen it, and because the records that existed told everyone they had more time. A recent First Street report found parts of North Carolina devastated by Helene could now experience a once-in-100-year flood every 11 to 25 years. Not once in 1,000, every 11 to 25 years. The math has changed, the mountains have not. Hurricane Helene caused an estimated $78.7 billion in damage. It was the deadliest Atlantic hurricane since Maria in 2017, and the deadliest to strike the U.S. mainland since Katrina in 2005. 240 people died across 6 states, 107 of them in North Carolina alone. Megan Drye survived Hurricane Helene. That sentence is true, and it is also incomplete, because surviving and living are not always the same thing, and Megan has been honest about the distance between them. I did not think I would survive, but I wanted to die after seeing my son die. She has said this publicly, without apology, because this is what survival without the people you survived for actually feels like, and the world does not talk about it enough. She carries the question every survivor of this kind of loss carries. Why not me? Why did the water give her back and take Micah? Why did it take her parents and return her? What is the logic, if there is logic, inside a flood that swallows 4 people from the same roof and releases only 1? There is no answer to that question. There never is. What there is what Megan has chosen to do with the survival she did not ask for. She has spoken. She has shared her story, the rooftop, the current, Micah's last words, the 3 hours alone, so that the people who were not in Asheville on September 27, 2024 can understand what a 1,000-year flood does to a family in a mountain city that believed it was safe. She has kept Micah's name in the world. And she has kept going in the broken, imperfect, one-day-at-a-time way that is the only way any of this is survivable. Every episode in this series has a survivor who walked out. Jean Hilliard walked to a doorstep. Beck Weathers walked back to camp. Nando Parado walked out of the Andes. The 13 boys in Thailand were carried out of the mountain. This episode is different. Megan Drye walked out of the French Broad River, but she walked out alone. And that is a different kind of courage from everything we have covered before. Not the courage of survival, the courage of what comes after survival when survival was not what you chose and the people you would have traded it for are gone. Micah Drye was 7 years old. He wanted to be a superhero for Halloween. His last words were not a cry for his mother, they were a prayer. The flood took him. But the words he said in those final seconds, those belong to his mother now. And she has carried them, publicly and painfully, so that the world knows his name. That is a kind of courage the mountains cannot touch. 240 people died when Hurricane Helene turned inland. One mother held on in a flood for 3 hours and came out alone. Her son's last words were 4, and she has made sure the world hears them. If this episode moved you, do not scroll past. Share it, post it, send it to someone who needs to understand what extreme weather does to real families in real communities that believed they were safe. These stories matter beyond the news cycle. Megan Drye's story matters beyond the news cycle. Say her son's name. Say his name in the comments below. Micah. And before you leave, tell us, what do you think courage looks like when survival itself feels like the wrong outcome? When you are the one the water gave back and the people you love were not? Drop your thoughts below. This community holds space for the hard conversations, not just the triumphant ones. Subscribe to Courage Under Extreme Weather, because not every story in this series ends with a walk back to camp. Some of them end with a mother in a hospital bed asking why. And those stories, the ones that don't resolve cleanly, are the ones that change how you see the world. We'll see you in the next one.